So I'm now pleased to start our first session. And every year I meet many deans, many students, many graduates, many faculty and many staff. And I always come up with a top 10 list of your key priorities. One of your top 5 this last year has been the placement of students and graduates in jobs, because it's a job market that is changing very dramatically. And so what I wanted to do was start with our very first session with a captain of industry of a major employer who could talk about how he sees the world of employment changing for your graduates when they graduate. And I think he is from the world's largest recruiter of business graduates. To give you an idea, approximately 40,000 graduates a year are recruited by PwC. So they're very much leaders and change agents in this field. So what will happen is our speaker will speak for about 15 minutes. I'll then do a Q&A in the chair with him, and then we'll open it up to the floor. We've got a team of 4 with roving mics, so any question you'd like to ask, that will be your chance. So please do, we'd love to have your questions. So without further ado, please welcome our first speaker, Kevin Ellis, the former chair and senior partner of PwC for the UK and the Middle East. Kevin, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real honour to be here. And as Andrew said, my lens on higher education is through that lens of being a major recruiter. And that's not just because of size. What I experienced in my time at PwC and what I'll talk about now is kind of what we were doing, so were all the other professional services firms, and so were all the other recruiters. So let me just put in kind of the context of what I'm going to talk about. PwC in Europe employs 120,000 people, and the average age of those people is about 30. So it's a very young organization, and that's because it's very much got a pyramid structure. And at the bottom of that pyramid is the 20,000 graduates we recruit every year. And at the top of the pyramid are the partners that kind of own the organizations. That's about 3,000. And the real challenge in an organization like that is trying to get that match of headcount to effectively the economic cycle. I led PwC in Europe for 8 years until last summer when I retired, and I was on the board for 16 years. And during that time, we had numerous big geopolitical events that changed effectively that economic cycle. And the biggest impact on profit was trying to match recruitment and training, that conveyor belt of training, to that cycle. The financial crisis in 2008, we had to lay lots of people off, and we had to shrink the amount of people we were recruiting. The consequence of that for us was that 3 years on, when those normal recruits coming out of business schools and out of universities would be effectively being able to lead as managers, that level was shrunk because we hadn't recruited enough people. So 3 years after that financial crisis, all the professional services firms were really struggling to find talent to fit into that market. So when COVID came along in 2020, and the economic cycle, as we all know, kind of ground to a halt in that kind of shockwave around spring 2020, we took the decision then not to lay people off, and more importantly, not to reduce the job offers that were already out there. We did that deliberately because we took a view that this was something that would come through, and we didn't want to shrink the market in the future. That kind of serendipitous decision paid off for us. Probably 21 and 22 were some of the most profitable years we saw in our firm, because as the market rebounded on the back of COVID, we had a full quota of staff to meet that market demand. But now, in my last year, and now in the year after I've passed over the reins to others, we probably face the most complex challenge of all. How do you deal with the challenge of AI? What will that mean in terms of recruitment numbers? What will that mean in terms of that pyramid structure that we have in place? Probably more importantly, what will that mean in terms of the training cycle that people do in their first 3 years in an organization like ours. A few weeks ago in the Financial Times, there was an article by Sarah O'Connor. And Sarah, in her article, talked about her own personal development story as a leading financial journalist. And her story goes something like this, something that I know from the generation in this room we can all relate to. She learned more, not through her formal education, but she learned more when she joined the Financial Times and was given the task of writing the daily market summary. Because she passed that to her editor, and she stood next to him when he was on his word processor, effectively editing, correcting, and explaining to her how to write such an article. And over time, he had to edit less, and over time, she got more confident, and then she became the leading financial journalist she is today. Her concern is the future Sarah O'Connors will be AI bots. There will be no learning standing on the shoulder of the editor because the first draft will be produced by AI. A recent book called Skill Code by Matthew Bean goes further than this. He would argue that one of the bedrocks of humanity is the sharing from experts to learners of key information. And with AI replacing that, the book argues that there are more challenges wider than just education that are going to impact society. And if I look at my own career journey, I joined PwC back in 1984. I joined there to get qualified and then go and get a proper job. And the reason I stayed was there were things there that interested me. But if I look back on the different events that led me to be senior partner and chairman, probably the most important impact were the mentors I found along the way. The mentors that effectively I came across when I was doing those more mundane tasks, those cash flow reconciliations, those first draft reports that Sarah did, those first pieces of research. And therefore, if those tasks are going to be removed because of AI, then finding the mentors will be harder, and that will have a knock-on impact in terms of aspiration, opportunity, and making the right decisions. So in the last 2 years, we were looking at what do we do in the face of the basic tasks that our workforce for hundreds of years have done as they kind of learn the ropes of joining a firm like ours, are being removed. And as a board, we went away and we discussed this many times. And I'm sorry to say we never found the right answer, but I can tell you where the thinking was going. The first point was that our investment, like every other organization's investment in AI, is extremely expensive. And therefore, there was a huge push from what is obviously an accounting firm based on numbers to reduce the training budget and redirect it towards the technology budget. And to an extent, that will happen. There was also a huge push to effectively get rid of the pyramid structure that we have with those 20,000 people coming in at the bottom and say move to more like a diamond structure where we have very few people at the bottom and we recruit them when they're trained further up the organization to get rid of that entire cost. I don't think that's feasible because the demand that we have for that manager and trained grade is so enormous, they won't exist in the marketplace. But I think other organizations, like the investment banks and some of the smaller consulting houses, may well get rid of the first few years, and therefore may well get rid of the graduate recruitment area. What we came up with as being feasible alternatives was one, can we train those people by using kind of shadowing schemes, kind of going back to the old apprentice model? So you have effectively the senior people all being allocated a number of juniors. This is a model being used by a number of the law firms across Europe at the moment. But our conversations with the law firms themselves and the senior partners of those law firms was that actually it's quite hard to do in practice both at volume, in terms of the number of people you need to bring through this process along this conveyor belt, but also clients push back on it, because clients want to see the reduction in cost caused by AI, and they like to see that effectively in front of their very eyes. So they don't want to see bigger teams on the premises doing the work. So therefore, that shadowing option probably isn't available. The model, I think, that will become certainly trialed and tested will be kind of moving into more of the old sandwich course and longer-term higher education as part of the first job pathway. We've experimented over the years what we call flying start, i.e. for the first, you do a 4-year degree, and during that 4 years, you spend about 18 months inside the organization during busy periods. And that's been pretty successful. Where our debate was going is actually if you don't want people to join the organization until effectively they're more business ready, do you link up with universities and business schools to have a longer, expanded period of training with work experience along the way to effectively minimize how much downtime you have in an organization when those basic tasks are no longer available to us as an organization to train our people. And that will be the model that they'll be testing at the moment. And as I said earlier, whatever my old organization is doing, everyone else will be doing the same. What does it mean? What does it mean for graduates? What does it mean for the people that are attending your business schools? Well, I think the first thing is I've not got a crystal ball, but it's highly unlikely that my old organization will be recruiting 20,000 people in Europe in the future. I think that's highly unlikely. Is it 10? Is it 15? I was asked numerous times by journalists who wanted a scare story to give them a number. And it would be inappropriate to try and give anyone a number, but I am certain that number is coming down. The other thing is if the number comes down and we use the pathways of preordained working alongside business schools and universities, then I think there'll be less jobs available for the generalists, i.e. those people that don't decide what their career is going to be, they go to higher education, and then they seek a career. At the moment, probably 70% of our recruits come in through that route. That will be the route that I think will cause those generalist degrees to be less attractive, but at the same time, will have impacts on the employability of further education colleges and schools who will have less jobs for their graduates if they're not already part of an existing pathway. So I think my kind of view and my kind of thinking as an employer is if this is going to be the pathway caused by AI, if there are going to be fewer jobs, but you're going to need people to be better trained, it's a huge opportunity for higher education and industry, i.e. employers, to work more closely together, to design the pathways that will enable talent to both come out of education into the job market fully equipped and be part of that existing pathway. That's kind of how I see it. As I say, no one's got a crystal ball, but the change that's coming and the debates we were having and the debates I was having with other CEOs about the future of the recruitment market tells me that we are now at a point of inflection. And the thing with AI is no one knows where it's going, but everyone knows whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen very, very fast. So I'll stop there and ask Andrew to join me on stage. Thank you very much.
Kevin, one of the things we talked about last week when we had a preliminary conversation, in addition to AI, was outsourcing and the impact that's going to have in more expensive employment countries for graduates. Can you just elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, you've got a double hit coming. For organizations like mine, everyone, and all other professional services, everyone wants the price to come down. And therefore, what you're going to see is already a lot of the research tasks that in the past someone like I would have done in my first few years are now being outsourced to, if not AI, to a 24-hour clock in, say, Asia. So where we were going to do a big deal and we needed lots of research done, rather than have a team in London that you can see or a team in Manchester that you can see, you then actually say, well, I'll tell you what, there's a cheaper version that we can go to in Bangalore. They will do the research, and also they'll hand it back to us first thing in the morning. So it gave a speedy and cheaper source of work for us in London, but at the same time, it took work away from effectively the west to the east. And that, again, is alongside AI, meaning it's harder to train people because there's less tasks available to train them with.
So let's say if you were a father of a 22, 23-year-old business graduate today, what advice would you give them in terms of building as much flexibility into a career, given there's such uncertain times?
It's a really good point, and I am the father of a 22, 23-year-old. So if they listened, doesn't always happen. I think the speed of change is getting faster and faster and faster. So the idea of someone like myself going into a job and being able to grow with the job, I think it's harder. So I think my advice to them now is you want to join organizations where the technology that will be the language of the future is going to be made available to you from day one. So in a way, there's kind of an encouragement to join bigger organizations rather than startups. Although startups are very exciting and everyone wants to join a startup, the trouble with joining a startup is there's less people to learn from and less technology to stay up to date with. So if you're looking for how your CV will look in 5 years' time, it's really important to stay current. And therefore, my thinking at the moment as a father and just someone answering that question is you want access to the technology that will probably be a foundation attribute when you go for your next job in 5 years.
Okay, very interesting. Let's talk about uncertainty and managing in uncertain times. What advice would you give a young graduate going into a job that the employer is saying there's geopolitical uncertainty, there's economic uncertainty? How do they learn and succeed when so much of the current, let alone the future, is unknown? Where do you get the wisdom from?
I think it's a really good point. And I was very outspoken about the importance of the office and not working from home. And it's for exactly that reason. I think you learn more from watching others, and you learn more from building the relationships of those around you that you respect. And you don't get that if you're not effectively face-to-face. I think one of the reasons why this conference is so successful is the need for human contact is now greater, not less. And so I would say the same to, if like my younger self, if I was advising my younger self, would be your best chance of success is to be the best advised version of yourself you can be. And to get that advice, that means being face-to-face with the people that you learn from, the people you serve as clients, and generally your peers in the office.
So many of us here today can understand that the problem we have is that when you talk to recruitment agencies, they're saying if you demand staff go back to the office, they'll leave and join a company where they can still work from home.
I think that would change. So I go back to my own experience. We originally felt that it was important to give staff the flexibility, and there is the days of being present for the sake of being present, I think, are gone. There is a flexibility there. But the way we solved it is we said that it was really important that everyone came to the office 3 days a week. And we actually said we'd measure it. That was not popular with either recruitment consultants or our staff. The reason we did that was we thought that we had to be equitable to everybody. If we didn't measure it, then some people would take advantage of it and some people wouldn't. And that wasn't seen as fair. I think it was really important to start with fairness and transparency. So we were very clear, it was 3 days a week. in answer to any questions, I was very clear, and my successors said the same, that I felt my career benefited from being in the office 5 days a week. And I thought if I was advising anyone, I'd say be in the office more, as much as you possibly can, because that will benefit your career. But the rule was 3 days a week, not 5 days a week, if that makes sense. Minimum of 3.
Very interesting, thanks. Let's talk about lifelong learning, because you need to keep learning every 12 months. We all understand that. And you've got these online lifelong learners now making some inroads in the market. What is your view about what a business school should do in terms of the education of a student after they've graduated from their undergraduate and postgraduate programs?
That's a really good point. I think there is, in our more disparate world we're in, with more online and information being freely available through the internet, there's an even greater demand for community than there ever has been. And I think business schools, schools in general, and businesses will benefit hugely by working harder on the alumni connections. If I look to my old organization, we have invested hugely in the alumni network because, again, when you're a big employer, people think back to if they're studying or their first job, they always think back positively. And therefore, you've got a huge competitive advantage about recruiting future students, gaining through better incoming lecturers, and also helping in the job market. So I think there's a massive need and desire for community. There's a massive need and desire by everyone in society to feel like they belong to a gang, a community, a body. And I think the business schools have got a really big advantage there. In a way, I think the Americans led this more so than the Europeans. I think it was part of their culture more in schools and universities and businesses. But I think there's catching up to be done, but I think there's a massive opportunity there because this desire for community that's been caused, I think, by the fragmentation created by online learning.
And if we look at the other end, the very top end of executive education, you're an AMP graduate from INSEAD. I'm an AMP graduate from Harvard. What's your view about expensive, top-range advanced management programs? Do you think more business schools should offer them?
Definitely. I didn't get the opportunity to do an MBA, and I only went to INSEAD because my mentor actually suggested it. He had gone to INSEAD himself, and one of his colleagues had gone to London Business School to do the AMP equivalent program. If I hadn't gone to INSEAD, I never would have pursued a management role. I only liked working with clients. I didn't think management or leadership was for me. But being effectively dipped into a world that was beyond the borders of anything I'd ever done before. I've been swimming in a kind of pond which was PwC specific, and most people I knew and learnt from were PwC. And then I broke out of that effectively and went on a course with people from all over the world, from all different industries at different stages of their life. And when I came back from that, I did my first management role when I was 42, and I was on the board 4 years later. But I wouldn't have ever gone down that road if I hadn't done the AMP program. And since then, a number of people that didn't get promotions or weren't sure what they were doing with their careers, I've advised them to go to do an AMP program, one in Columbia, and 2 in London, and 2 in INSEAD. So again, I think, goes to that community point. Because I'd gone down that path and felt I benefited from it, I became an advocate of it myself.
Okay, next question. Imagine you're the career development office at a business school, and a couple of students come to you and say, look, I want an international career. I'm not sure where I should go, but I know I need not to be too domestic in my job experience. Where in the world would you say the best future jobs for business graduates lie?
You've got 50 countries in this room, Andrew.
58.
58 countries in this room. Look, I think everything goes in cycles. And I would say the cycle that, so when I was looking after PwC in Europe, I had a specific responsibility for the Middle East. And in the time that I was looking after the Middle East business grew from about $300,000 to about $2 billion in 10 years. And the reason for that isn't the success of our business, that obviously had part of it, but mainly it was the expanding need for advisors. Driven largely from NEOM in Saudi, that was a big factor. But whenever any economy goes through that kind of growth spurt, if you're a junior, younger business graduate, you're probably going to get more experience quicker. So it doesn't mean the answer is the Middle East. It means at this point in time, there is a growth spurt going on in the Middle East that demands professional services and consulting advice and financial support. And therefore, if you're a business graduate, you'll probably go faster up the kind of learning chain at that part of the world at this point in time. It will move again in a couple of years, I'm sure, to other areas. But I think that's probably where I'd go if I was that person today.
Very good. Okay, we've got another 10 minutes. Happy to open it to the floor for questions. There's a couple in the front row for a start, if you can bring one of the mics down. Okay, they're on their way. You're getting there.
Am I on? Yes. Thank you so much for an insightful presentation. Oksana Gurwi, UCL Global Business School for Health, London. You have painted a future where the juniors will not have the opportunity to get on-the-job training that they used to get from the seniors. But it sounds, ladies and gentlemen, that we now have another opportunity within the business schools to train those juniors where they wouldn't have been able to get trained. So what is it that we can do as MBA directors and as deans to replace that kind of, to create that training environment that will be missing very soon for our juniors?
That's a really good question. I think where the opportunity lies is that, again, if you go back to the employers like my organization, we are going to want our staff to have acquired some of the great teaching you'll get through an MBA, whilst at the same time getting some work experience. Probably not as much work experience they'd have got in the past, because there aren't as many tasks for them to do. So therefore, there is a really important collaboration that's required between business schools and major employers, and probably some of the smaller employers too, to sponsor people along pathways so they can join the business school at 20 or 21 or wherever, and they get a portfolio experience of both MBA training and work experience. So they come out and they fill the middle of that pyramid at manager level on a more rounded, capable position. So I think it's about actually leaning into the employers as deans and leaders of business schools to experiment with what can help them get there and how can they do joint sponsored degrees with you.
Another question at the front here, Leo.
Thank you. I'm Wendy Loretto again. I introduced myself earlier as chair of the board, but I'm also from the University of Edinburgh. My question is about what we should teach, because we're all thinking now, or most of us are thinking now, about interdisciplinary opportunities and particularly responding to global challenges and thinking about interdisciplinarity as a way of approaching that. And if I picked you up correctly, you said that 70% of your graduates used to come through from non-business degrees, the generalist. And I know when I was heavily involved in undergraduate programs, PwC and the other big recruiters valued that, saying that actually they brought a whole range of skills, insights, etc., from other disciplines to your company. So if you're now maybe only recruiting more from business and finance related degrees, how should we be changing what we teach in order to bring in perhaps some of that interdisciplinary richness that your generalists previously would have brought you?
Yeah. So firstly, that's not happening today. What's happening today, Loretta, is that I'm, if you like, trying to predict where it's going to go. So if I'm right and the number of graduates is going to shrink from 20,000, I will also suspect that because the pathways will be in place, the generalists will get squeezed out. So the generalists aren't being squeezed out today, but that's where I think it will go in the future. And therefore, because of that, I think there's a really good point that whatever degrees we collaborate on to produce between the business schools, the universities, and the employers, we have to make sure it's broad enough so that the end product has that capability. So effectively, you will have to build in that broad understanding to those tailored degrees. You can't just, what we don't want to do is narrow the capability. So I think what will happen is we will have to work to a form where the business school and the employer comes up with a kind of portfolio experience to get to that 5 years out, and that portfolio experience will not be just finance. It will be broader.
Very good. Other questions? You can see, Leah, there's one there about 5 rows back.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm Rohit from Indian Institute of Management, Ranchi. My question is, if you look at young recruit, how you go about evaluating them? So in your own career, last 4 decades, more than that, how has it evolved? And what do you think the future would be in the AI space? Is the way you measure the performance of young recruit, how it's going to change in the future? So your reflection on the last 4 decades and how the future would be for evaluation. Thank you.
Very good question. I think we've used, nearly every big employer, because of the volumes of people going through the process, we've used AI, we've used technology to shrink, effectively, to deal with 300,000 applicants to, 20,000 jobs. I think there's still a lot of learning that face-to-face interviews have not effectively been eroded as a necessity. I think a lot of it is how you fit in, as well as your educational background and capability. And a lot of it has to be around both ability to present and fit in, and the ability to carry on learning. The point you made earlier, Andrew, about everything's going to be about lifetime learning. The skills we start with when we finish our graduate school will not necessarily be the skills we need in 5 years' time because the world's moving so fast. So I think in that assessment, there's more assessment around learning capability and kind of resource investigator type skills than probably there was in my day. In my day, going back a long while, it was probably more about the certificates you already had rather than the capacity to learn in the future.
Very interesting. Okay, any more questions?
Hello, sorry. I've just been given the mic, so I'm going to go for it.
Good for
Hi.
you.
My name's Celine Floyd. I'm Chief Skills Officer at a company called Capfinity. Kevin, I'm really interested in, obviously you're describing the rate of change and how the world of work is changing. What, in your view, are the behavioural or more kind of human skills that you think will really set the new generation of talent and leaders coming into work for the best success out there?
Yeah, I think that probably hasn't changed that much. I think a lot of it will be about that problem solving, and a lot of it will be about the ability to present or explain. But again, one of the things I think I noticed in my time at work was I think the world has become more aware of manners and politeness and the ability to listen. And I think when I probably started out in the 80s, that was kind of effectively seen as kind of secondary. I think COVID changed that. I think that respect for employers from employees changed as well. So again, I think some of the softer skills that probably weren't as seen as relevant in the 80s when everyone was going for effectively more old-fashioned leadership, that's changed too. So I think there's some real positives out there that we've all learned, that the kind of care, politeness, and good behaviors are probably more, we're more aware of that now, I think, at the end of my career than probably I saw at the start of my career.
Very good. I can see that we're out of time. I'm just going to ask you, because you're very candid, one difficult but important last question. So a candidate from Good Amber BGA school comes to you for interview, followed by another candidate who looks identical, and they open a suitcase full of LinkedIn Learning modules that they say they've had trained. Who do you recruit, the graduate, or do you think the time has come where some of these micro-credentials from online companies mean something?
I think the overriding thing will be whether someone fits in and whether their human skills are right for your organization. And I'm not sure, it depends on the individual, but I think the more human contact you can have in that learning process, the better equipped you are for the world we're going into. There's no way, however good AI ever gets, it's ever going to trump human capabilities. That's what's always in the lead. And the more skills people have in that area, the better they'll do.
That's a great note to end on. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to Kevin Ellis.
Thank you. See you then. Thank you.